Right, so let's dive right in. Today, we're going deep on XRP and trying to figure out what its potential is, looking ahead to 2025. Now, I know you've probably heard about it already. XRP had a pretty crazy year in 2024. It surged something like 240%. Yeah, it's been making headlines for sure. But the sources we've been digging into suggest that this might just be the beginning. Especially with some potential changes coming up on the political and regulatory scene, things could get really interesting.
Yeah, I think that's what makes it so intriguing. You have so many crypto projects out there that are still just ideas, But Ripple, the company behind XRP, they're already making some serious moves in the world of international payments. They're not just talking about revolutionizing things, they're actually out there doing it.
That's a great point. And I think it's important to remind everyone, for those who haven't been glued to every single XRP headline, can we quickly recap what makes XRP so unique in the first place?
Absolutely. Most cryptocurrencies, they rely on that energy-intensive mining process, but XRP is different. It uses something called the XRP Ledger Consensus Protocol. It's a fancy name, but basically it allows for crazy fast transactions. Like, we're talking just a few seconds to settle.
So much faster than traditional payment systems then, right?
Oh yeah, for sure. Way faster. Like, we could be talking days, even weeks faster than something like Swift. And it's not just about speed either. It's also way cheaper. You're looking at fractions of a cent per transaction with XRP compared to like 35 to $50 for a Swift transfer.
Okay, so speed and cost are definitely huge factors here, but it looks like our sources are also pointing to this massive potential market for XRP.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
What kind of scale are we talking here?
Well, one of the reports we have, it's from McKinsey. They estimate the global payments market is already worth, get this, $2.4 trillion in revenue, that is. And they're saying it'll probably reach like 3.1 trillion by 2028.
Wow, that's trillion with a T.
Yep.
That's definitely a market worth fighting for. But I'm seeing some potential hurdles here as well.
Yeah.
Definitely some hurdles.
Especially when it comes to regulations. It seems like things are pretty turbulent for XRP on that front.
Yeah, you're right. That SEC lawsuit against Ripple, that's the big one. They ended up having to pay a $125 million fine. The SEC, they were claiming that Ripple was selling XRP as an unregistered security, you see. But the interesting thing is the court also ruled that on the secondary markets, to regular investors.
That does seem like a pretty important distinction.
Right.
So even though that whole lawsuit created a ton of uncertainty, at least it provided some clarity about how XRP is classified, at least here in the US. But what about the bigger picture, the political climate overall? Our sources seem to suggest that things might be shifting a bit in favor of crypto.
Yeah, there's definitely a sense of that. The incoming Trump administration, they've been pretty vocal about their support for cryptocurrencies. They see it as this key driver for innovation and economic growth. Plus, you have Paul Atkins. He's known to be pretty pro-crypto when it comes to regulations, and he's expected to take over at the SEC. So there's a lot of optimism that the whole regulatory environment might become a lot friendlier.
That could be huge for XRP.
Yeah.
Less uncertainty usually means investors are more comfortable, right?
Yeah, that tends to do the case.
But how could this, friendlier regulatory landscape actually translate into real benefits for XRP?
Well, for one thing, it could really open the door for an XRP ETF. It's kind of like what we saw with those Bitcoin ETFs,
Yeah.
It would basically mean that big institutional investors like pension funds and hedge funds, even those large asset managers, they could get involved in a really big way. Imagine them being able to just easily add XRP to their portfolios. That could pump a ton of capital into the market.
Yeah, that's definitely a big deal. And from what I'm seeing, institutional interest in crypto is already on the rise. So if you combine a pro-crypto administration with the potential for an XRP ETF, that paints a pretty optimistic picture.
Yeah.
But are we getting a little ahead of ourselves here? Are there any reasons to be cautious?
You always got to be cautious in the crypto world, right? I mean, volatility is kind of baked into the whole thing, and relying solely on what politicians are saying is never a good idea. It's important to remember that Ripple's success ultimately depends on them actually building real-world applications for XRP. They got to secure those partnerships with major financial institutions and prove that XRP is actually useful beyond just speculation.
Absolutely. It's easy to get caught up in all the hype, especially when you see some of these price predictions.
I know, right?
Speaking of which, we've seen a whole range of forecasts for XRP in 2025 from our sources.
Yeah, a pretty wide range.
What's the general sentiment?
Well, they run the gamut, really, from a fairly conservative $2.15 all the way up to, get this, $50.
Wow, that's quite a spread.
Yeah, it really reflects all the uncertainty around those regulations and how quickly XRP might get adopted.
Okay, $50, no, that'd be something. What would have to happen for XRP to actually reach that level? Are those predictions taking into account any potential roadblocks?
Well, to hit $50, you'd need a whole bunch of things to go right. You'd need clear regulations, widespread adoption by financial institutions and payment providers, and a huge surge in demand. And that demand would have to be driven by real use cases, not just hype.
So it's not just about speculation and hype, it's about actual progress in real-world adoption.
Exactly.
But even with all this optimism, I'm noticing our sources are pointing out some potential competition for XRP.
Oh yeah, there's always competition.
Specifically, they mentioned Stellar, XLM, which has also seen its price jump recently.
Yeah, Stellar's been making moves.
So how does Stellar stack up against XRP? Are they direct rivals?
It's interesting, actually. Stellar was created by one of the Ripple co-founders, so there's definitely some shared DNA there. But while they're both aiming to shake things up in the financial world, they're approaching it from different angles. XRP is more focused on those cross-border payments for banks and big financial institutions, while Stellar's really emphasizing financial inclusion, connecting people who don't have access to traditional banking and enabling those microtransactions.
So they come from the same family, but they're on different missions.
That's a good way to put it.
Which just makes this whole crypto landscape even more interesting, right? You have multiple players, each with their own strengths and target audiences, all trying to shape the future of finance.
Exactly. And that brings up a really important question. With all these central banks around the world developing their own digital currencies, those CBDCs we keep hearing about, what role could XRP play in all of this?
That's a big one. If CBDCs become the future of money, then figuring out how they all interact with each other and with existing systems, that's going to be crucial.
Couldn't agree more. And that's exactly what we'll be digging into next time. We'll be exploring the potential role of XRP in a world where CBDCs are everywhere.
Ooh, can't wait. So make sure you join us for part 2 of our XRP deep dive, where we'll really unpack all of that. All right, so we're back and ready to dive even deeper into the world of XRP.
Yeah, we covered a lot of ground already. We talked to XRP's unique consensus mechanism, how it stacks up against traditional payment systems. And we touched on that whole regulatory roller coaster it's been on. And of course, how the political scene could impact its future.
Right, and I think it's time to really dig into those price predictions for 2025. We saw a pretty wide range from a few bucks to potentially hitting $50.
Yeah, that $50 prediction definitely caught my eye.
So let's unpack that a bit. What would have to happen for XRP to reach those high numbers?
Well, the most optimistic predictions, they seem to be banking on a perfect storm scenario.
A perfect storm. Okay, break that down for me.
Well, imagine this. The Trump administration comes in, they really shake things up, implement all these crypto-friendly regulations, maybe even clear the path for an XRP ETF.
That's a lot of ifs, though. Are we putting too much faith in political promises?
It's a valid concern, for sure. Governments, they tend to move pretty slowly. Even with the best intentions, regulatory changes can take a long time. And there's always the chance of unexpected roadblocks popping up or the political winds shifting again.
So betting on political change alone seems a little risky. What about Ripple itself? What are they doing to actually drive adoption and make XRP more than just a speculative asset?
Oh, they've been busy. They're not just sitting around waiting for the regulations to change. They've been forming partnerships left and right with banks, payment providers, even governments all over the world.
So they're really putting in the work to make XRP a real player in the global financial system.
Exactly. They're not just talking the talk.
What are some of their key strategies?
Well, one of the big ones is integrating XRP into existing payment corridors. Think of it like adding a superhighway lane to an existing road. It makes those cross-border transactions so much faster and cheaper.
And I'm seeing signs that this approach is actually working. Several major financial institutions have already started using XRP for their cross-border payments.
Right, and those early adopters, they could be a sign of things to come. As more institutions see the benefits firsthand, the speed, the low cost, the reliability, it could create this snowball effect.
So it's not just about the tech itself, it's about building that network of users and proving that XRP can solve real-world problems.
Absolutely, it has to be more than just a cool idea.
And that brings us back to the comparison with Stellar.
Right, Stellar.
We talked about their different missions, XRP targeting those big institutions, and Stellar focusing more on financial inclusion. But what about their actual strategies and partnerships? How are they playing the game differently?
Well, Ripple, they're playing the long game. They're really focused on those big partnerships, those established players in the financial world. They're going after the big fish.
And Stellar, are they fishing in different waters?
They're casting a wider net, you could say. They're targeting not just the big institutions, but also smaller fintech companies, startups, even individual developers. They're trying to build a more decentralized, more inclusive ecosystem.
So it's almost like a top-down versus bottom-up approach.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. Ripple's going for those big wins, those headline-grabbing partnerships, while Stellar's trying to foster more of a grassroots movement.
Both strategies have their pros and cons, right?
For sure. Ripple's approach could lead to faster adoption by those major players. But Stellar's focus on inclusivity might give them a broader reach in the long run.
So it's not necessarily a winner-take-all situation. Both XRP and Stellar could coexist, each catering to different needs within the financial system. But there's this other big factor looming out there, isn't there? The rise of those central bank digital currencies, the CBDCs.
Oh yeah, the CBDCs. Can't forget about them.
They have the potential to really reshape the whole playing field.
No doubt about it. They could be a huge opportunity for XRP or a potential threat.
Okay, so help us unpack that. How could CBDCs be both an ally and a competitor?
Well, imagine a world where every major country has its own digital currency. Suddenly, the need for a bridge currency like XRP, something designed specifically for cross-border payments, it might not be as important.
Right, because if all these CBDCs are digital and can easily connect with each other, why would you need an intermediary?
Exactly, but that's assuming a level of cooperation and interoperability between all these different CBDCs that might be a bit too optimistic.
So you're saying different CBDCs could end up being like different languages? You'd still need a translator to make sure everyone can communicate effectively?
Exactly, and that's where XRP could really shine. Its speed, low cost, and that established network of financial institutions could make it the perfect bridge between all these different CBDCs.
So instead of competing with CBDCs, XRP could actually become the glue that holds this new financial system together.
It's definitely a possibility, and it's a role that Ripple seems to be actively pursuing.
Are there any signs that central banks are actually open to this idea?
It's still early days, but there's a growing recognition that interoperability is going to be crucial for CBDCs to be successful. And Ripple's been actively engaging with central banks, participating in pilot programs to show them what XRP can do.
So they're not just waiting around to see what happens. They're actively trying to shape the conversation and build the infrastructure for this CBDC-powered future.
Absolutely. They're playing the long game.
And that brings us to our final part. We'll be diving even deeper into the world of CBDCs and exploring the potential challenges and opportunities they present for XRP.
It's going to be a fascinating discussion.
And we're back for the final part of our XRP deep dive.
It's been quite a journey, hasn't it?
It has. We've explored XRP's potential in that massive global payments market. We talked about the regulatory hurdles, those price predictions.
And of course, we can't forget about those central bank digital currencies, those CBDCs.
Right, the CBDCs, the big unknown.
It's exciting and maybe a little bit intimidating at the same time.
Absolutely, because what happens when governments really get involved in the digital currency game?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
And I think a lot of our listeners are probably wondering the same thing. So what does a world with CBDCs actually look like? Can you paint a picture for us?
Okay, so imagine this. You open up your banking app, and right alongside your checking account, your savings account, you see an account for digital dollars or euros or yen, whatever currencies your country's decided to digitize.
So it's like having digital cash, but issued directly by the government.
Exactly. But it's more than just a digital version of your physical cash. CBDCs could offer a whole range of benefits. Faster transactions, cheaper transactions, maybe even increased financial inclusion.
That all sounds pretty promising. But what about the potential downsides? Our sources have mentioned some concerns about privacy and government control.
Yeah, those are definitely valid concerns. With CBDCs, governments would theoretically have a much clearer view of every transaction you make. So yeah, privacy and the potential for surveillance, those are legitimate worries.
That's a little unsettling, to be honest. And what about control? Could governments use CBDCs to influence our spending habits or even restrict our access to funds?
It's certainly possible. Imagine a scenario where the government wants to boost spending on certain goods or services. They could program the CBDC to offer discounts or rewards for those specific purchases.
So it's like targeted stimulus checks, but with a much finer level of control.
Exactly. And on the flip side, they could also restrict spending on things they don't want you to buy. It's like programmable money.
Wow, that's both fascinating and a little scary. Seems like CBDCs could be incredibly powerful tools, for better or for worse.
It all comes down to how they're implemented and what safeguards are put in place to protect individual rights.
Right. It's all about the implementation. But let's bring this back to XRP. We talked earlier about how CBDCs could be both a threat and an opportunity.
Yeah, that's the big question.
So how does that all play out in this new landscape?
Well, on the one hand, if CBDCs become the dominant form of digital currency, and if they're all seamlessly interconnected, the need for a bridge currency like XRP, something designed for cross-border payments, it might diminish.
Right, because if all these CBDCs can talk to each other directly, you wouldn't need a translator.
Precisely, but that's a very idealistic scenario. In reality, we're probably going to see a more fragmented system with various CBDCs operating on different platforms, using different technologies.
So we're back to that language analogy.
Yeah.
We still need a universal translator to make sure all these different CBDCs can interact smoothly.
Exactly, and that's where XRP could really come in. Its speed, its low cost, that existing network of financial institutions it already has, it could be the perfect bridge between all these different CBDCs.
So instead of being replaced by CBDCs, XRP could become the glue that holds this new financial system together.
That's the idea, and it's something that Ripple's actively working towards.
They're really positioning XRP as that neutral bridge between CBDCs.
Facilitating smooth cross-border transactions and making sure everything's interoperable.
That's a pretty bold vision, but is it realistic? Are central banks actually open to this idea?
It's hard to say for sure. It's still early days. But there's definitely a growing recognition that interoperability is going to be key for the success of CBDCs. And Ripple's been doing a good job of engaging with central banks. They're participating in those pilot programs to demonstrate what XRP can do.
So they're not just waiting around to see what happens. They're actively shaping the conversation and building the infrastructure for a CBDC-powered future.
Exactly. They're thinking long-term.
And that's what makes this whole space so fascinating. We're witnessing a massive shift in the way money moves and interacts, and it's impossible to predict exactly how it's all going to play out.
That's the beauty of it. We're all on this journey of discovery together.
Well, folks, that wraps up our deep dive into the world of XRP.
We started by exploring its potential in the global payments market. We navigated that complex regulatory landscape. We even dared to look ahead and imagine a world transformed by CBDCs.
We've discussed the challenges and the opportunities,
The hopes and the concerns.
and hopefully you've come away with a better understanding of this fascinating cryptocurrency and its potential role in the future of finance.
Remember, this world of crypto, it's always evolving.
Stay curious, keep learning, and be prepared for the unexpected.
And who knows, maybe one day we'll look back on this conversation and be amazed by how far we've come.
Until then, happy pondering, everyone.